Sakaris and Price from the legendary Historic Wall Center. And this next segment brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. And they want to thank C's fans for such a fabulous season out at Nat Bailey Stadium this summer. And if you're looking to guarantee your visit, your seats for you and your crew, however big it is, for 2025, please visit CanadiansBaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. The one and only Jeff Paterson is back with us here as we get set for preseason game number 3. We can say this evening, sometime late-ish tonight, we're halfway through the preseason. Then that is a glorious thing to be able to say, Jeff.
Yeah, by Monday night, 5/6 of the way through the preseason.
Yeah.
So busy weekend for the Canucks, all out on the road. First time this season or preseason that they've been the visitors. Yeah, they played the neutral site game in Abbey the other night, but they were the home team then. So into Seattle, into Calgary, and on Monday night, Edmonton. And I think, universally across the board in the National Hockey League, when you get into that second week, starting to trim down numbers. I think the level of play, the number of veterans per team goes up. So hopefully we start to get some answers to the many questions that still exist around this Vancouver Canuck team. Still have a lot of bodies in camp because of this compressed first week of the preseason. So, I think we're going to see a mix of vets and some youngsters and guys that still have an outside shot of making the roster, or at least making it down to the final cuts as we go here. Rick Tocchet talked about it after practice at UBC on Thursday that, he knows he's got some true decisions. Part of that is because of the injuries to a couple of players, but also some of these youngsters have stepped up and performed pretty well through the first couple of preseason games. So we'll see if that continues here and how many of them are going to run the gauntlet. I don't imagine anybody would play all 3 of the games this weekend, but certainly I would think some of those prospects, the ones that are, knocking on the door, we might see them get into 2 of the 3 games.
And you've got an interesting perspective on those of us, and myself included, who thought that maybe JT Miller was a little bit banged up why he didn't play. Maybe he wasn't. He's been practicing the last couple of days, and we anticipate he probably makes his preseason debut here in this one. But he's gone full veteran this preseason, it sounds like, huh?
Playing the veteran card. Yeah, I think he was the poster boy for the home game on Tuesday, at least on team socials. And I think we all thought, oh, well, that means that JT and Brock, and by extension, Danton Heinen, would all be in the lineup. And then JT didn't play on Tuesday, and he didn't play Wednesday in Abbotsford. So he is one of the few guys in camp that hasn't set foot on NHL ice here in the preseason. He was asked yesterday, are you anxious to get going? And he kind of deadpanned and said, no, not really. This is still the first week of the preseason. He's been around for a while. So he'll get in there. He was asked, is there an ideal number? He didn't really answer that question, but I would think he will play 2 of the final 4 at the very least. Maybe he gets into 3. Whatever the case, I don't think anybody has to worry about JT Miller. He'll be ready to go. The engine will be firing on all cylinders when they open up against Calgary on October the 9th. So, Rick Tocchet has mentioned through camp in Penticton and again yesterday, JT came to camp and tested one of the better. His fitness test results were among the best on the hockey club, and it almost felt like him getting to skip the first couple of games was almost a reward for that. The leadership, the preparation, everything that went in. Again, Rick Tocchet knows what he's got in JT Miller. He has to figure out what he has in some of his other players. And so not a huge surprise that Miller hasn't played to this point. But yeah, I think we will see JT Miller make his preseason debut possibly as early as tonight in Seattle.
Jeff, you've been doing this for a long time as well. What do you look for in preseason games when it comes to rookies, veterans, things like that? I know we're early in, but what do you look for when you're watching a preseason game?
Well, I have to say, Blake, you had it right yesterday. I was listening to you guys as I drove out to UBC, and it all tracks back to do something. And it did originate in the preseason as I would sit and watch these guys who I thought had this incredible opportunity, whether they were draft picks or free agents. You're playing on an NHL rink with NHL management and scouts all watching. Do something with the opportunity. And I always think about a guy like Stan Smeel when he was in management and him coming through the ranks, and a guy that just didn't miss an opportunity to lay the body and try and drill guys through the boards. And I get that the game has changed and we're at a point now where systems and structure and guys don't want to think outside the box, and they certainly don't want to stray outside their responsibilities. And they worry that if they do, that's how they're going to get noticed. And so a lot of cookie cutter guys in the preseason, I still think of Vilmer Ulrichsen the other night's a perfect example. He saw an opportunity to absolutely paste a Seattle Kraken. He knew that there'd be some retribution, and sure enough, but he was prepared to deal with the consequences. And here's a 19-year-old junior eligible guy, doesn't drop the gloves an awful lot, but he did something. He got noticed. He finished a check. He's a big body. That has to be part of the toolkit, even if he doesn't want to fight. I get that part, but if you are out there and you're finishing every check, guess what? It's going to draw the attention of opponents. And sometimes you may have to back up your actions, and he did that. And so credit to him. And Rick Tocchet mentioned it after the game. Like, he noticed. And so that's what I'm looking for. Like a guy like Sammy Blais, we've talked about, hey, you roll through a training camp, you're not going to run teammates or prospective teammates through the boards, but you get into preseason action. Now it's time to step up your game. And didn't think there was a whole lot in his game on Tuesday. They came back. He was one of the 6 guys that played the second night in Abbotsford. There were a couple early checks in the first period, but I'm still looking to sort of see that perpetual motion, a guy that just doesn't pass up an opportunity to separate a man from the puck. And we really haven't seen that a lot from Sammy Blais. He's not going to play every preseason game, so time is running out. And if he gets an opportunity here tonight or Saturday in Calgary, that's what I'm looking for. So, it's not all about the physical stuff. I mean, the guys that are expected to put pucks in the net, they've got to make some things happen offensively. And even if they don't score, I want to see them in the right spots, puck on their stick. What do they do with it? Do they take their chances? Like Daniel Sprong the other night. I mean, we're all raving about the goal late, but you saw Daniel Sprong in the first period on the power play, not afraid to shoot the puck. Like, it was a shooting gallery. It kept coming to him on that off wing, and he was just winding up and firing. He hit a post. He ripped a couple wide. Like, those are the types of things based on your skill set. I just want to see guys sort of play to the character that they've got and the expectations. And 2 games down, 4 to go for a lot of these guys. The next time they suit up, it's going to be their last chance. So leave management and the coaching staff with something to remember you by getting out there and ultimately doing something in these preseason games.
You take anything away from, I know we talked about younger guys and guys doing something, but the core, the Quinn Hughes, the Elias Pettersson, the Brock Boesers, I guess you can even throw Jake DeBrusk in there because he signed the long-term contract. We haven't seen JT Miller yet, but if you do take anything away from what those guys are doing this early on?
I know that there's been some chatter coming out of the Abbotsford game about Elias Pettersson, and look, he went through the motions. I was out there. I'm not going to freak out about it, despite Sekeres trying to suggest that I was going to be the one that was upset. Put him on his nose, and I did listen yesterday. So there you go. No, it's just Elias Pettersson didn't do much until the end in overtime when he sets up DeBrusk for the winner. So, his name's on the score sheet. He contributes to the victory. But I was just thinking to myself as I had the long drive back from Abbey the other night. Imagine the reaction in this market, guys, if Elias Pettersson had done what Daniel Sprong had done with 14 seconds left in the third period. And people can say, oh, it's early preseason, he's ramping things up, whatever. I mean, Daniel Sprong stepped up in that moment, and clearly it mattered to him, and he made some things happen there. And I look at Quinn Hughes, and it was funny because there were a couple of shifts early on in the game in Abbotsford where Quinn Hughes was absolutely toying with the Calgary Flames. And it kind of felt like his first preseason action, and we really didn't see much of this in training camp in Penticton, but first time playing an NHL opponent in exhibition games, and it almost felt like Quinn was just testing to make sure it was still there, that Norris Trophy tool bag was still there. But he had a couple of shifts, one where he entered the zone, circled the net, found Atu Ratu for a pretty good look in front, and the Flames were just mesmerized watching Quinn Hughes do Quinn Hughes things. I would have liked to have seen that as a bare minimum from Elias Pettersson, a shift or two throughout the game where you just thought, all right, like, he's into it. He's dialed in, that sort of that PD magic that we know is in there somewhere. It really hasn't emerged yet through training camp or the preseason. So one game, but I just thought, like, Daniel Sprong was motivated with 14 seconds to go. It could have been Elias Pettersson. It wasn't. It was fun to see Sprong because you don't see goals like that scored in the NHL much anymore. But, what a different world it would have been had that been EP40 on the business end of a great individual effort.
I wonder if in his own mind, if he's getting 3 games, one's the total test game. How does my knee feel? If I try this hard, do I feel it the day after? And then maybe the idea is ramp it up and try to be more explosive in games 2 and 3. We will see, I suppose. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he progresses throughout the season, and then the microscope really gets, of course, focused in once the regular season begins for him. Our first time talking to you since the first 2 games have been complete, and the young guys all made their impressions. It's going to be interesting this weekend now to see if anybody follows it up, and I'm talking about Lekkerimäki and Ratu in particular, who all of a sudden got put into the kind of realistic category to make the team. The one flashes, the 1 or 2 flashes that they've shown, sort of think, okay, good. They are as advertised. They are doing what they're supposed to do. To me, it's the follow-up, isn't it, Jeff? The ability to show coach, yeah, but you can get this every night or most nights at the very least.
Yeah, and it was fun to see them do their thing and the reaction from the marketplace after the home game against Seattle. And part of the test, and Rick Tocchet was upfront about this. He wanted to see how some of these guys would respond going to back-to-backs. And look, that's life at any level of hockey. I talked to Max Sasson after the game in Abbotsford, and he was like, hey, the whole AHL schedule was back-to-backs. This is nothing new to any of us. So, I mean, there's an element of truth there, but early in the season, first time. So there's some fatigue. There was different roles and utilization. They played on different lines, obviously, with different line mates the second game. So all part of the evaluation. And neither one of those guys, Lekkerimäki or Ratu, was poor out in Abbotsford. It's just that other guys stepped up and stepped into the spotlight a little bit more, and so they weren't as noticeable as they were on the preseason opener. So, yeah, I don't know what the plan is for either one of those. Tocchet did mention both Ratu and Sasson as guys that he wants to continue to see here through the preseason. So I would expect that one or both will play 2 of these 3 games here this weekend, and we'll see how things go there. But that is the challenge. You're right. If you want to play and earn a spot in the best league in the world, you're not going to have 82 banner nights, but there has to be that baseline. There's got to be that level of consistency, and you've got to show the coaching staff that you can get there and stay there. So a little bit of a drop from game 1 to game 2, but really in my mind, it was more about the focus was on a Kiefer Sherwood, who I thought skated miles out in Abbotsford and was probably the best Canuck. I know DeBrusk scored twice, and that's great. I mean, he was signed to score goals. And if he gets through the camp and he hasn't scored any in the preseason, we're wondering a little bit. So for Jake to get 2 in his, and even he mentioned, he's just nice. So you're a goal scorer, you want to see and get that feeling again. It happened for Jake DeBrusk, including the winner in overtime. So, a nice launching point for him in this chapter of his National Hockey League career. But I think as we get to sort of the middle week in the preseason, the focus remains on some of those guys that are right there on the cusp, and the Canucks have a bunch of them, and that's good news. There's still a handful of young players in camp here who haven't appeared in the preseason. Sawyer Minio, Kirill Kudratsev, both of them were skating and taking turns with Tyler Myers on the practice sheet out at UBC on Thursday, which would suggest that one or both will get into some game action here over the weekend. And then up front, there are a few others. Danil Klamovic skated with the game group. He's sort of a forgotten man at this stage, but kind of feels like maybe they throw him a bone and get him into one preseason game at the very least. So we'll see where it goes. And Akito Hirose still has yet to appear in preseason action. And boy, when you think of where he was and his cameo there late at the end of the previous season after turning pro coming out of college, and last year almost a forgotten year for him. Injuries really plagued his season, but he's out there, but just not sure kind of where he figures in the Vancouver Canucks or the Abbotsford Canucks plans for that matter.
Kevin Lankinen getting the start tonight. That seems quick. I mean, are you a little surprised that he's getting in between the pipes after just joining the team a few days ago, really?
I am. At this time last week, he was over in Helsinki wondering about his future, and he signed on Saturday, flew in late Sunday. It's been a whirlwind for him, but he's had 3 practice sessions with the groups, whether it was the full groups or the non-playing group the night of the games. But boy, energetic guy. Talked to him yesterday, and we talked to him before Rick Tocchet had announced that he's going to go with Lankinen Friday, and Tocchet said probably Silovs on Saturday, but he left the door open, I guess, to a change in plans there. But Lankinen just, he's raring to go. I looked it up, hasn't played a game since mid-April in the National Hockey League, obviously the backup to UC Saros down the stretch and into the playoffs. So been a while since he has been tested in any sort of game action. And you're right, on the surface, it feels like it's been pretty quick here, but they're running out of opportunities as well, probably to get him a couple of preseason starts here. So we'll see what the weekend brings. But no, he declared himself fit and ready and was hoping to get one of these. I kind of thought maybe it would be reversed because they've still got Nikita Tolopilo as well, who I thought had a decent camp in Penticton, and we haven't seen him face any game action yet. They went with Jiri Patera the other night in Abbotsford, and he was all right. Had his moments. Didn't love the Jake Bean goal from long range through traffic off the left side, but he also made some big stops on a couple of breakaways as well. Based solely on camp performance, I wasn't sure that Patera had earned the second start of the preseason after Artur Silovs was so good on Tuesday night, but they went with Patera. They're going Lankinen. And it's all very interesting to me just because Nikita Tolopilo had a nice season his first year last year as a North American pro down in Abbotsford. I kind of felt like maybe he was knocking on the door to get some NHL starts here, given the uncertainty around Thatcher Demko, but then Lankinen entered the equation. And so Tolopilo continues to battle and practice, but I'm not sure that he's going to get into any game action here in exhibition play.
You might have nailed it though, right? Like they don't need to see him versus NHL. Like he would have to go really awry for them really to need him, you know. So maybe that's just it.
Jeff, when you talk about Lankinen and you mentioned, you know, him being excited and all of that, you think he knows when Demko does essentially come back, he's going to be the number 2 guy, or do you think that there's still a battle for that amongst the goaltenders here in Vancouver?
Yeah, he's been asked a couple of times just about this circumstance coming into camp late, you know, last year, knowing his role in Nashville, and here it does sort of feel like it's a bit of a derby because of the uncertainty around Thatcher Demko. You know, I think at this level, coaches like goalies that make saves and win hockey games. And so when he gets in there, he's going to have to do just that. Artur Silovs, so we saw what he was able to do down the stretch. He's looked good here in his half a game in Penticton in the scrimmage, and really good the other night against the Seattle Kraken. So Artie looks dialed in, and I don't know if that was a response from him to the organization after they went out and felt they needed the insurance of a proven guy like Kevin Lankinen. Whatever the case, some of the goaltending questions we had around the position heading into camp have shifted a little bit, but there are still plenty of questions around goaltending with this Vancouver Canuck Hockey Club. So we'll see where it goes. My hunch, and this can change based on what we see here over the final week of the preseason, I would assume right now that Artur Silovs gets the opening night game against the Calgary Flames based on what he did for the hockey club in the playoffs last year. In the absence of Demko, it sort of feels like he is the 1A in this equation. But again, I mean, if Lankinen rises up and makes a statement, maybe that can change. But the way the schedule shakes down, they have no back-to-backs until the middle of November. Lots of practice time, lots of evaluation time. I think it really could be, we've seen this a little bit. Look at Boston last year with Allmark and Swayman, like almost a rotation there with 2 guys that they believed in and trusted. I could see the Canucks kind of going down that road, provided that both of these guys hold up their end of the bargain. The question is, do they start to get a sense of how close Thatcher Demko is? Is he back around the group? Is he out there on the ice? Like, right now, he's not. And so he really doesn't enter the equation. We know that he's not going to be available for opening night. But as he does start to ramp things up, then I wonder, like, how does that change anything for either of these goaltenders? And we should say, guys, I think this was a pretty fortunate bounce on the Canucks' part, that just getting Lankinen at the price they did. But with the news yesterday that John Gibson's going to miss 3 to 6 weeks down in Anaheim was apparently one of the teams that was already interested in Lankinen. Had they known the Gibson injury news, maybe Lankinen winds up down the coast in Anaheim, and it's a different sort of storyline here for the Vancouver Canucks, scrambling to find another National Hockey League goaltender. Whatever the case, timing is so often everything in life. They got Lankinen done in camp, and we're going to see him in a Canuck uniform, albeit still in Nashville colors. He said he's ordered his new gear, but it's not here just yet. So he said he spent a good part of his flight from Helsinki thinking about what he wanted to do with his mask. Goalies always love to ponder those kinds of questions, and I think fans always like to see the final product. But Lankinen will be suiting up in Nashville gear, the stuff he's been practicing in all week, at least in the early going here when he gets into the net for the Canucks.
It's going to be very clashy. I'm not a fan.
Casey DeSmith did it last year with black and yellow Penguins colors for a while before he finally got his new gear.
Before you go, back to JT Miller, subject of our poll question today. What's the top threshold that JT Miller crosses this season for the Canucks in points? 70, 80, 90, or 100? And some of this is motivated by the tearing once again of Dom Lucian, who called him a B grade all-star. Basically, was the context for him, and the quotes in that article about JT Miller still tell us that he doesn't get much respect league-wide. People do not think of him as a 100-point guy, as an elite player in the NHL.
Yeah, and anybody that racks up points, I mean, a big part of it is health and durability, and that is one thing that really doesn't get talked about with JT, but he has barely missed any time in his 5 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks. Was looking at this earlier this morning. He's missed 4 games in the last 3 seasons total, and one of those was a healthy scratch in Winnipeg in Game 82 late last year. So not an injury or an illness there, just a coach's decision, essentially, if he can stay healthy. And that was one of the storylines for the Canucks last year, was all of their top-end scorers basically played 80-plus games. Is that going to happen again? I'm not sure I can bank on that, just the fickle nature of injuries. But it is a contact sport, and guys do go down from time to time. But if JT can stay healthy, I don't think there's any reason he can't be a 90-point guy. Mm-hmm. We saw he got to 99 a couple of years ago, and I thought maybe that would be a career high. I got to 103. So, I think we've learned by now, best not to bet against this guy, and it does sort of feel like maybe doesn't get the respect that he deserves around the National Hockey League. But I don't know that he needs to have a 103-point season. I think he's kind of like the Canucks themselves. They don't need to have a 50-win, 109-point season. It's more about consistency. It's more about playoff readiness and preparation and hitting the postseason, on their game and in their groove. And I think the same thing kind of goes there for JT. But anything, just the amount that he plays, the penchant that he has for producing on the power play, the way the puck runs through him on the power play, even if they throw some new wrinkles in to the mix this year, he's still going to be a focal point with a man advantage. So I would say 90 would be the baseline. That anything less than 90, if he plays the full season, would be a little bit disappointing. I mean, he could still have an 85-point season and be a huge contributor to the Vancouver Canucks. But for the sake of the poll question, I would vote on the 90-point threshold.
You mentioned, Dom, B-grade superstars. I always go back to Team North America. JT Miller was on that team back in 2016, and there are some very, very good hockey players that were forwards on that team that they could have chose not to pick. But you mentioned not getting the respect and stuff. He definitely has it from, I think, people that no one watched the game at an NHL level, but some
I
other
can't remember the last
not.
time I thought of that. He was on Team North America, really.
He was on Team North America. Vincent Trocheck, Scheifele, Saad, Nugent Hopkins, JT Miller, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Nathan McKinnon, Larkin, Johnny Gaudreau, Jack Eichel, Jonathan Duran. Yeah, there's a lot of good
follow
players.
That up, Irf. I mean, he's going to be part of Team USA. He's a big part of Team USA at the Four Nations face-off. Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, I think, did he not finish second to Austin Matthews in points among Americans in the National Hockey League last year? You think of this golden era of USA hockey and how many really, not just good, but great players there are. And that's sort of an underreported fact that JT was second only to Austin Matthews when it came to point production among the Stars and Stripes last year.
Unbelievable. Jeff, a pleasure as always. Thanks for doing this. Enjoy the weekend's worth of action, and we'll circle back next week. Yeah, sounds good. Lots to dig into here with 3 games in 4 nights. So the evaluation process continues, and we should mention, and Irf already knows this, but Rinkwide coming back Monday night. We're going to do the final 2 games of the preseason. We'll have live streaming Rinkwide post-game pods. So taking the weekend to rest up, because it's almost time to get after it with Rinkwide Vancouver for another season.